This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
You know when you reach that age where everyone and their mother won't shut up about their credit scores, yet it seems like no one really understands what's so special about those 3 random numbers? That's because credit scores are meaningless, unless you have Credit Karma to show you how to use them. We use those 3 random numbers, plus your financial profile, to help you find your next opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
If you wanted to support me and also listen to every single episode of this podcast ad-free, then you can do so on Patreon, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. I will link to everything down in the show notes below. And if you wanted to support me for free, you can subscribe on YouTube. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 38. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about how to start a business, as well as my story starting a business in the 3D printing space. With that being said, let's jump right into it. Before we actually get going, I just wanted to kind of add a disclaimer in that while I do have a business in the 3D printing space, I am in no way, shape, or form an expert. Please do not take my word as law. All I'm giving is my opinion and the advice I have for the situation. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt. Just because I started a 3D printing business in Southern California does not mean that a business started up in Maine or in New York or somewhere like London or anywhere else in the world is going to be exactly the same. So just something to think about before I get into it. But with that being said, let's get started. I wanted to first get started by telling my story and how my business came about. So if you have listened to the introduction episode of my podcast, this is the very first episode I put out, then you do know how I got started. I saw an ad and I got a 3D printer, and I would say that I was messing around with it, upgraded printers, basically did 3D printing without a business for a little bit over a year before I decided to try and make some money off of it. And so this was in 2020 when I first got my printer, so I'd say 2021 was when I opened up my business officially, and I was on Etsy. Etsy was the first place I went, and the reason I went there is because they have a built-in audience. You can find a ton of other businesses on there. It just to me, I had been on eBay in the past, and it seemed like a better version of eBay to me. So that's why I got started on there. And I was just basically throwing up anything that I could think of. I had raffle boxes, I had poker products, I had home decor items, I had fridge magnets. Basically anything that I thought of, I made and I put up there. And I wasn't thinking too much about a specific type or a specific theme or niche that I wanted my store to have. But let's remember that because that's important later. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay. If you're into 3D printing, you know how important precision is, and PCBWay delivers that, not only in custom PCB manufacturing, but also in 3D printing services. Whether you need high-quality parts for your next big project, rapid prototyping, or even CNC machining, PCBWay has got you covered. With a wide range of materials and super competitive pricing, they're your go-to for bringing your designs to life. Check them out at PCBWay.com. Again, that's PCBWay.com, and take your projects to the next level. After I had been doing that for a few years and garnered up a pretty decent amount of sales, I decided to expand into Shopify. And when I started, I didn't really know too much about Shopify. It was very user-friendly, so I was able to kind of whip up a website and start working on that. And the reason that I transferred over to Shopify, or wanted to at least, was because the Etsy fees, they definitely add up. When you add up all the Etsy fees as a part of every order, including the listing fee, the processing fee, the transaction fee, and sometimes the offsite ad fees, it ends up being over 10% of your total order. And for somebody like me who was young and didn't know too well how to run a business myself or price things correctly, those really ate into my profits. So I wanted to get off of Etsy and get on Shopify, which had better fees, somewhere around 3 to 5% usually, and just wanted to see if I could make it there. And with a Shopify store, I started making a presence on Google. I had a Google business profile. I was still working out of my home, so I didn't have an official address yet. But if you search 3D printing services in the surrounding areas, I would often come up. And that started leading to a lot more of people contacting me, asking for custom items to print, which was what I wanted to do. As much as I did enjoy being on Etsy and selling the things that I made that I thought of, my end goal for my business was to have a services business where people came to me with things that they wanted to be printed, and then I would take care of them. After running the Shopify store for a little while, I decided to go out and pay someone to design a website for myself. I didn't really think all the way through needing a website for my own, comparing it to Shopify. I just wanted something that felt a little bit more professional and something that somebody with expertise in the field could make. And with that, that's kind of where I am right now. I have the Etsy store, which still has a ton of different listings up there, and people purchase occasionally, although definitely not as much as it used to because I stopped focusing so much on it. And then you have the website, which definitely caters more towards the services side of the business. I'm in the middle of getting my website redone right now, actually, and there's going to be no products on there that you can purchase at all. So it's actually going to be tailored entirely to people who want custom products made. And those are kind of the two ends of the services of the 3D printing business that I have right now. Now that I've told you my whole story, let's talk about the things that I think that I did wrong and some of the things that I think I did right. One of the things that I think I did right was I got on Google pretty early on in my business. I would say maybe a year into having the business was when I looked into getting the Shopify site, and that's when I also started my presence on Google. And I think getting on Google is one of the most important things to a business. Obviously, Google is the biggest search engine by a large margin, and if you can get yourself ranking high on those Google searches, it's going to drive a ton of traffic to whatever website you're pointing to. Just your business in general, you're going to get a lot more views, and views equals customers if you have a good conversion rate. So getting on Google early on was definitely nice because now I have a longer tenure built up with Google, which they look at favorably. One of the things that I definitely think that I did very wrong was not finding a niche for the 3D printing site when I was on Etsy. When I was on Etsy, I still am. While I'm on Etsy and I'm just posting whatever I want or whatever I can think of, pretty much whatever's in my imagination, there's no actual niche for my shop. It's just 3D printed objects. And things that what I noticed going throughout the Etsy store, I've had it for about 3 years now, is there was always, it kind of came in waves. Like for a few months, my fridge magnets would be really popular and then those would die down. And then for the next few months, the raffle boxes would be really popular and then those would die down. And then the poker products would be very popular. None of them all at once. And that's kind of the problem with a shop that isn't super niche down, is people who are looking for a specific product, like say a raffle box, they're going to find your raffle box, but if your store isn't specifically made for raffle boxes, they're not going to come back, or they're not going to be able to be upsold. They're not going to find other products. They're just going to come and they're just going to be like, oh, this is just kind of a random mess of just whatever products that are up here with no real kind of structure. And it also makes it really hard for Etsy to push your store because Etsy relies on keywords and it relies on their shops being niches so that they can push it to the right customer. And basically what I was telling Etsy was, hey, I do all kinds of different things, but I don't have a specific goal. So Etsy wasn't too sure. Etsy couldn't really push my shop to somebody who was looking like just for raffle boxes or somebody that was looking for just poker products, because if somebody types in poker products, yeah, they might eventually find a listing of mine, but if my shop isn't tailored completely to poker products, then Etsy is much less likely to push me. Another thing that I think that I did right with this whole business was I started catering for reviews really, really early. When I first started the business, I would say like the first 6 months in, I was getting orders. And I was honestly scared to ask customers to leave a 5-star review because I didn't want them to see me essentially begging for a 5-star review and think, oh, he's desperate, and then leave a bad one because I was panhandling to them. But I eventually overcame that fear and I started asking for 5-star reviews. And so I built up a ton of 5-star reviews very, very early on. I think within 2 years of my business, I had over 55-star reviews, which everybody looks at favorably. If you have, the more 5-star reviews you have, the better you're going to be. And Etsy, especially, and Google will push you if you have more 5-star reviews. So that's something that I would look out for very early on, is just start pushing for reviews as much as you can, because it gives your store that reputation and that reliability standard that looks good on any kind of search engine, but also looks good to any customers that are looking at your business. Now that I've kind of gone over what I think I did wrong versus what I think I did right, I'm going to give what I think is an ideal storyline or a timeline for somebody starting specifically a 3D printing business. And once again, before I get into it, I am not at all an expert. This is just my opinion. So I think before you get any kind of online presence, I think it's important that you figure out your niche. What is it you're going to do? Are you going to be specifically a services business? Are you going to sell products? And if you do sell products, what industry are you going to focus on? Because finding that niche is so important, especially if you're going to be online for the majority of your selling. Finding a niche is going to be easier, make it way easier for the search engines to find you and push you to the right people. So once you find your niche, I would then suggest starting an Etsy store. There are definitely other options. You can go to eBay, you can go to Mercari, you can go to Shopify immediately. But in my opinion, Etsy is the best in terms of audience, the cost of startup, and just overall their search engine. Like I said, Etsy has a huge customer base already built in that are ready to buy and looking for products that you might sell. And so I think it's really important for you to get on Etsy, also because it's such a low cost to start up. You only have to pay 20 cents per listing fee every 4 months. And as long as you aren't going crazy with thousands and thousands of listings, then it's relatively cheap to start up and it's free to run. You only pay when you sell an item. The next step I would say is scaling up through Etsy ads and reviews. Like I said, 5-star reviews, super, super important in building that reliability and the reputation of your business. So I would suggest as soon as you start getting orders, just focus on the customer service, make sure you're communicating well with the client, and then ask them for a 5-star review after their product has been delivered. And I would ask once, twice, even 3 times. When I'm on Etsy and I sell an item, I have 3 different times that I ask them for a review. I ask them about a week after their item has been delivered. I just follow up and I say, hey, how you doing? Is the product good? Are you liking it? And if so, could you leave me a review? And then I ask about a month later. I just check in. I say, hey, just checking in. You never responded. And then I have the final one where I say, hey, this is going to be the last time I message you. Just checking to see how you're doing. Are you happy with your product? And if you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star review. So that's really important. And Etsy ads, that is going to be something that you're going to obviously pay money for. But Etsy ads, especially if you have good keywords and you're ready for that, there are lots of free things that you can do to be shown organically to Etsy. But Etsy ads is definitely that step up that you can take to scale up and start really building a big business. The next step I would say after you're doing that and after you've been running that for a while and built up a good reputation is to eventually transfer to a Shopify store. And the reason I wouldn't suggest starting with a Shopify store is, yes, they have the good deals, but it's $40 a month for the basic plan after you are done with the free trial that they do. And to me, $40 a month is a lot, and it also is not as built in. So you have to know a lot about SEO, you have to know a lot about keywords, and you have to really get your products. You really have to work hard to get your products shown to the right people. And that's why I like Etsy, because it's a little bit easier to use and they have that built-in customer base. So you don't have to work as hard and you can focus more on starting up your business. But once you transfer to a Shopify store, like I said, the fees are way lower. And if you know what you're doing, then you can make a ton of money and you can save a lot of money while you're doing it. The next step that I would say, and this is just ruling out any kind of brick and mortar store, I don't have that, so I'm not going to get into that since I have no experience on it, is getting a website for yourself. And the reason that you would be doing that is, yes, it would cost a lot more to put up, but you can really customize it to exactly what you want it to be. And you can also have it look exactly how you want it to be. Shopify is somewhat limited in their free themes that they offer. So even if you're wanting to do something like pay somebody to professionally make a shop for you on Shopify so you can keep all those great e-commerce features, or you can pay somebody else, for example, on WordPress to make an e-commerce site for you. It would just be a lot more customized and you could really have it fit the look of your brand. And the final step is, of course, becoming nationally and internationally famous and riding off into the sunset, because obviously we've just created a super successful business, so we're going to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And of course, I'm kidding. It's going to take a lot of work to get there, but I hope that everybody who starts a business is going to get there eventually. One thing to consider is maybe getting an LLC. And the reason I didn't touch on it too much is because it's kind of a finicky thing. I feel like that teeters on the precipice of me offering legal advice, which I do not want to do. I don't want to get tied up in anything like that. Basically, what I'm going to say about it is I have an LLC. I got one about 4 years after I started my business. And I think it's okay to go a long time without an LLC. I think it's fine to just operate a sole proprietorship. But that's just something that you're going to have to do your own research on. And like I said, I don't want to touch on it too much. I think there are pros and cons to getting an LLC, but one thing I do want to say is I definitely don't think that you need to start with one, because that's a ton of upfront costs that you're going to have to consider. And with that being said, I think that's kind of all I had to say. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. If anybody has any kind of questions about business, I'd be happy to answer them. I have a link down in the description where you can contact me. There's also links down there to support me if you would like to. You can support me for free by subscribing on YouTube, or you could support me through Patreon, where you can get all my episodes ad-free. I would really appreciate if you would look into it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.